Welcome to New Release Review, part of the Movie Friends podcast. My name is Seth. Today we're talking about Monkey Man from 2024, directed by Dev Patel. We will be discussing spoilers throughout this entire episode, so if you haven't seen Monkey Man, turn this off, rush to the theater, watch the movie, then come back and listen. Today, I am joined by Kristen Ankiewicz. Kristen, how are you?
I'm great, thank you.
I'm very excited to be sitting down to talk about Monkey Man.
Me too.
So I had asked you if you'd be interested in joining me for this episode. One, because I saw your review of it, and two, because I primarily know you as maybe the biggest John Wick fan that I know. Next to my mom.
I'm the biggest John Wick fan in the universe. I mean, it's not even of the people you know, it's of everyone.
Right. And I think that this movie has, as soon as the preview dropped, everyone was like, oh, okay, so it's like a John Wick movie, right?
Yeah.
So just to start off, just kind of some like initial thoughts or your initial reaction to your first time watching Monkey Man.
Well, I definitely loved it, as you probably read in my review. I loved it. And it was like, it definitely spoke to John Wick fans, meaning I think John Wick fans would also love this one. I don't think it's a ripoff or a clone of John Wick. Like I hear various terms that people use. I don't think it's a ripoff or a clone. I think it's more like an homage. There's even a couple of Easter eggs referencing John Wick. The action style at some point might remind you of John Wick, and the suit, he wears a suit, there's some pieces that are definitely like gonna remind you of John Wick, but I think in a good way. Like I loved all of it, and none of it felt derivative. It all felt, I think because it was set in India and had like a slightly, like the political undertones were stronger, and there was more of it wasn't an exact replica of John Wick. There were definitely some big differences, and I think that's what made it really interesting to me, which is that it was both similar but also different. And also Dev Patel, to me, is a very interesting actor. So I just loved that he was in it. And I feel like there's a very strong, underdog exacts revenge and achieves victory, plot, which I definitely loved. The parts about India were super fascinating because I'm not personally, I haven't watched a ton of Bollywood. I saw RRR, but that's about it. But all the Indian, the mythology and the politics and the references, they made me want to kind of learn more about that culture and figure out, what is this like a real part of the religion there? Is this what's real and what's made up and all of that? It definitely piqued my interest as opposed to just being, like a flavor. It didn't feel like a flavor of John Wick. It felt like its own thing. So I was very pleased. It wasn't a perfect movie. There were flaws, if you want to hear what I thought what the flaws were. Probably the pacing in the first half. It was a little slow in the first half. But the way that I judge movies is I forgive a lot of flaws if the overall vibe speaks to me. And also if it sticks the landing. And it definitely stuck the landing, which was extremely important to me. I think if it was really good in the beginning and kind of weak at the end, I would have had a very different impression. But it definitely stuck the landing. It started to really flow for me when he's in the trans women temple. And he's obviously been beaten down and he hasn't gotten victory. And it doesn't look good for his character. It looks like he's not going to achieve anything. And then this transformation, which I think is a miracle, the fact that they had a transformation in the trans temple was super fascinating because that made me want to learn about the third gender that happens in Indian culture, and everything about that was fascinating. The training montage, of course, we get a beautiful training montage. That was beautiful. Pretty much everything from that point on was just flowed super beautifully and quickly. So I thought it really got a great, the second half of it was just so beautiful.
Yeah.
And the fighting style got an arc, which I thought was also, that was a bit similar to John Wick in the fact that in the first John Wick, he gets the crap beaten out of him. And then his, the dog happens, and then there's a transformation, and then he kicks ass and achieves victory. And so that was very similar. Like he definitely is like getting the crap beaten out of him, and then he goes through this transformation, which involves like I think a psychedelic and like a sort of like a realization of who he is, and all these kinds of like deep pieces to it. And then the part where he becomes like a killing machine starts, and I just thought that was really beautiful. I've heard there was definitely a style to the fighting in the beginning. I've heard it being compared to Jackie Chan. I'm not as familiar with Jackie Chan, but now I want to kind of go back and watch to see like if I agree with that take. But I definitely liked the fact that his fighting style gets an arc, his character gets an arc. You know, like that's the kind of thing I go to movies for. I want to like feel sucked into a story that starts in one place and ends in another. So yeah, I loved it. I thought it was so great, and I really like Dev Patel as an actor. But I will admit, I was pumped about this movie before I saw it. So like, I saw the trailer, got super pumped, and then I backtracked and I was like, okay, I got to watch some other Dev Patel movies. So then I watched The Green Knight, which was also incredible.
Yes, great movie. What I liked about, if we're talking about, it's unfortunate that this movie will get compared to John Wick as much as it has and will be, but none of the things that were similar felt like they put it in just because it was like you mentioned the suit, right? But in the story, it makes sense why he's wearing the suit. It's not just like, oh, Dev Patel was like, well, he's got to wear a suit because that's like a John Wick thing, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think any of the comparisons were either out of place. They all made sense in the movie. Everything he did made sense in the movie. And I just think it was more like an homage. But I'm kind of the mindset that I love John Wick so much that if someone says, hey, this is a John Wick clone, I'll watch it. That's not an insult to me. So I think it depends on the person. But like none of the John Wick comparisons were off-putting to me because I just wanted to see it. And like, even if it was just a cookie cutter, I probably would have been seated. But the fact that it wasn't cookie cutter was really nice and surprising. Yeah. So yeah, I think it depends on the person. But a big giant part of why I liked John Wick was because prior to that, I couldn't figure out what was going on. I never liked the Bourne movies. I never liked, like, there were so many action movies that other people really loved that I was like, who's punching who? Wait, where's the bad guy? Shit, what's going on? Like, I just confused. And that could be like a me thing, right? Like, I'm not saying it's, it could definitely be me not being observant enough. But for me, like John Wick ushered in a whole era of clear lighting, the like long takes, and like an ability to follow the action, which I just think is really good because I want to follow the action. I want to see. That's the important. Like if I can't follow what's going on and I get lost, that doesn't help me follow the story. Like the action should follow the story and like enhance the story. So I definitely appreciated that whole trend. I hope it doesn't end, but yeah, I do think it was more of an homage than a clone. I've heard people calling things clones, and that usually is disparaging. And I wouldn't call it a clone. I think it was an homage.
Yeah, definitely.
And there were so many elements that were different. Like for sure, part of the joy for me with watching John Wick was that he's a good guy pushed to the brink, but he's not really a good guy. He goes on a murderous rampage, and there's all these like collateral damage, and like, but you're still rooting for him. And maybe you're rooting for him because they killed his dog, or maybe you're rooting for him because he's played by Keanu Reeves, who everybody loves. Yeah. And like that for me is the interesting part, is like how far can you push a character and still have people root for him? Whereas in Monkey Man, he's not murderous. He's not, he's really a good guy. He's got like a good intentions and good goals, and like, so I feel like it's fundamentally different in that sense. And like,
absolutely. From his origin, which is a child, watching his mother burn to death, which is extremely horrific. There's nothing that he can do from that point forward where we're not going to be in his corner. But even after witnessing that, we still see many instances where he's, doing the right thing, where he's being nice, where he's being kind. And so now we're like double endeared to him because the horror that he went through didn't make him a bad person. He's out for revenge, but he's like retained the niceness and the goodness that his mother instills in him. And all of the flashback scenes of them in the water, or when she's teaching him how to pray and, having him repeat after her, I loved all that stuff. One of the biggest complaints that I've seen about this movie is that it feels like it's too long and some of the stuff drags a little bit. And as I was in the theater, I kind of felt it, but I honestly think that it makes the movie better, which sounds counterintuitive. It sounds like everything, you don't want to say, oh, there's a slow part in this movie. But you had mentioned how even his fighting style goes through a transformation. When we start the movie, we don't know what the end is going to be. We see his plan. We see that he's working. He's training. He's fighting in these crazy wrestling cage match, bare knuckle
the
boxing
underground
things.
fighting.
So he's already at a level where we're like, oh man, he's getting into the position at the restaurant. Like he's doing the thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh man, this movie's going to be over pretty quickly.
I thought he was going to succeed right then and there. I thought he was going to succeed on his first attempt, and the fact that he didn't, and like then got the the fact that he didn't was like, whoa, and then
so
the
real,
it was like,
since he's already at that high level of willpower and the insanity that it takes to enact this revenge, for him to go up another level, there has to be time in between for us to believe where he gets to. But it can't just be like, oh, I woke up and now suddenly I'm like a killing machine.
It needs to happen over time. I'm glad that they took their time in the temple, and I love the entire temple sequences, and the fact that those people came also later on in the movie to help him. Oh my God, that was so fantastic.
Pretty great. And at first I was like, but aren't they like, like priests and like would they be doing this? But they put in, throughout the film, there's several mentions of violence against the trans people.
Yeah.
And so one of their members gets beaten up. Like beat really, really bad. And they know that it was these people who did it. And so I think that kind of helped them in their decision making to go in and kill everybody. I don't know, like that might be like that might be the weakest point, unless there's something that I really don't know about the Hindu religion.
Well, I don't know either. So that's the thing. I don't know either. So I'm going to have to look at like, do they have a peaceful, nonviolent, is there nonviolence baked into their, religion? I don't know. I'd have to look that up. But
realism aside, it's cool.
I'll also forgive. I mean, I mentioned the word forgive a lot, but I forgive breaks from reality if the ultimate picture, if I vibe with the ultimate picture. And I accept a bit of non-reality if the whole thing feels grounded, so it depends on the movie, but I'll accept some non-reality, a little bit of non-reality.
Definitely. I keep hearing everybody talk about Dev Patel in this movie, and rightfully so. He's great, but we've already seen him be great in other things, like The Green Knight. I was a big fan of him in Slumdog Millionaire. That movie has not been received super well, but I still think that he's acting really, really good in it. But what I took away from this movie was Dev Patel as the director. And for this to be your first movie, that's
incredible.
Crazy. And I don't see as many people talking about that fact. And I'm excited not to see what he does. Honestly, to me, it's like, Dev Patel, what are you directing next? Not necessarily what are you acting in next, but this is a huge, huge project, and to hear him talk about all the difficulties that the production faced, because they were shooting during COVID and they were like locked in, and he was saying, they had to put all of their crew into like roles on the film because there was nobody, they couldn't get people, and to go through all of that and it be your first film and to still produce this movie, I think is like, to me, that's the story.
That is a very good story. Yeah. And I definitely feel like not a lot of people, like when people talk about, I've heard other people mention other directorial debuts, and they would say, oh, this is so fantastic as a directorial debut. But I don't hear that with this one, even though it is, and like, usually that should be celebrated, I think. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the directing was fantastic, and the cinematography was fantastic. And yeah, I liked it a lot.
There were so many.
I did want to see the I can't remember the name of the character, but the one with the little vehicle. That
yeah.
I wanted to hit more of him. I mean, I know the movie was already pretty long, but I would have liked to see him more in the second half.
Alfonso.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was complicated too. Like, he's not a good guy, but in comparison with the dudes that he's working with, you do also start to feel for him.
Yeah.
I think it is a testament to how well, Dev is acting in this and how well the whole thing comes together that people have just kind of totally put it out of their mind that he also directed this.
I think that's true. They're so focused on the performance and the fact that the stunts, and like I heard that he broke his hand and his foot, or he injured his hand and his foot. I don't know if it was broken, but that, and then he had to do all these stunts one-sided.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't detect. They looked two-sided to me. So whatever he was doing looked pretty looked like he had his whole body involved.
You had mentioned the cinematography. There is a lot going on in how this movie looks. We're moving the camera with bodies as they're getting thrown around, which is something that we just saw in the most recent Roadhouse, which I enjoyed. I know people really hated it. I didn't like the CGI part of the Roadhouse fights, but the camera in this it's up close, it's personal, it's in the action. You feel like if this movie was in 3D, I would probably be like covering my face because I feel like some of those arms are getting thrown at me. The director of cinematography is Sharon Mir. He also did Whiplash. I don't know if you've seen.
I love that movie. Oh my God, that movie.
Yes.
So good.
He did Whiplash, and he also did John Woo's most recent film, Silent Night,
which I did not see. Did I see? I don't think I saw that yet.
Yeah.
That's another one I want to see. When regardless of whether it was reviewed well.
Right. Oh, always. You always have to see for yourself. I don't care what it is. You got to know. You're the only one who can know if you're going to like it.
Yeah.
I guess his name is Kid in the movie.
Yeah, which I didn't realize until I read. Yeah. I didn't notice that.
Because they're always just calling him New Guy. We don't have any characters who actually know him. Everyone who kind of comes into his life are people. I mean, everyone in the movie are people who come into his life like as the story is already going. And so it makes sense that no one is calling him by his name, but it's something I totally didn't pick up on until I looked up the cast and I was like, oh my gosh, that's right. He didn't.
I was saying, I didn't realize that until I read it later. I didn't read the synopsis before seeing the movie, which I don't know whether going in blind makes it a better or worse experience, but it was a surprise to me when he was getting beaten down in the first half, even though it's like in the synopsis, like the synopsis explains that, but like I saw it fresh.
Yeah, I try to not read anything from anyone because I don't trust anybody to not spoil something. I just don't. It's happened so many times at this point that like even the description of the movie that the movie is giving you, sometimes it gives too much. Or
too much,
you're waiting for that part to happen that is going to happen, and it's terrible. I did see the trailer for this probably in the theater, and that was the only thing. I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, I'm done. I don't need to learn anymore. I'll be there.
Yeah. The
You
trailer
got
did
me
hype
from
me
the
up.
one trailer.
Yeah, I got hyped up by the trailer. I did watch the trailer a number of times because I was
Yeah.
just so hyped for it. But the trailer wasn't exactly. I would say it didn't give too much away, but it was also slightly misleading because there were parts in the trailer that looked like the end of the movie that were really the beginning of the movie, which like I'm expecting in my head, I was expecting this or that to be like when he achieves victory, and it was in
Yeah.
fact just not at that point. So
Yeah.
that's just probably the nature of trailers, though. I think they're never going to be. Some of them give way too much away, but
Yeah.
they're also not going to be like a good representation of the movie really until you see the thing.
When we got to Kid on the run, and he's I think he's broken free of the police car that he's in.
Yeah,
Which
that
that
whole
scene
sequence
was
is insane.
insane.
Yeah, that whole sequence is insane. And
Yeah.
they filmed it like the same, like they filmed it like the cinematography enhanced that entire sequence because it was very
Yeah.
chaotic and like
Mhm.
people are flying, he's like flying out windows and everything was just very chaotic and kind of close up. Sometimes it was a very like close up claustrophobic style,
Yeah.
which also I think enhanced, especially in the kitchen scenes where like everyone's just kind of jammed in there
Yeah.
and like the fighting is happening in very close quarters. So I thought the cinematography really did a great job of enhancing the story and the action.
Yeah, when he's like running around the rooftops, and then he ends up in like a brothel, and the dude is fighting him with the axe, which is like, oh man, that was pretty wild. But it was about that point in the movie where I was like, they are making so many like extreme stylistic choices with this fight choreography in tandem with the cinematography, and I was like, is this too much? Like, are they doing too much? We've got the lights, we've got the close up, we've got the cuts. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to trust them to just do it. And again, for this being his first movie, I have to just admire the guts that they put into this,
Yeah. My favorite, like, I hate to say my favorite kill, but my favorite
Sure.
kill was the knife in the throat. Do you remember that
Yes.
scene?
Yes, absolutely.
And that I think was a John Wick homage because there's a scene in the first John Wick where he basically makes the guy knife himself.
Yeah.
And it's a very tense, like, you don't know who's going to succeed because there's a struggle and the guy gets a knife in the throat. It reminded me of that. But also very similar kind of like, like tense moment and then very close up and brutal,
Yes. The violence in this is brutal. I was yelling in the theater. Like I'm not ashamed to admit it. Something would happen and I'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
not trying to be rambunctious in the theater, like at all, because I'm not into that. But just it was just coming out of me. Like I was just exclaiming because
Yeah. Definitely. I saw it in the theater too, and it was a pretty empty theater, which was nice, and we got really good seats because it was a matinee. Yeah, I do like the brutality of the violence in it because I think it's a great, like that's exactly what he's kind of fighting against is the brutality of like, the people who are sort of like dominating the culture. So I thought it was a good use of violence.
That knife, like in the mouth thing, once he grabbed it with his teeth, I was like, oh my God, please. Like
with his teeth.
Please. I don't know. Like I have an idea of where this is going, but at the same time, like I just want this to be over.
I love that scene.
Oh my gosh.
I definitely did enjoy when he, clearly, and I don't know how realistic it is. I know like in judo, a smaller person can overtake a bigger person. So I've heard a review, I think Grace Randolph had a review where she was like, no, that's not realistic. And he's way outmatched and the bigger guy would destroy him. I don't think that's necessarily true because I know there's martial arts where being smaller and faster helps you. But regardless, I don't necessarily expect, like I don't care necessarily. Like I don't care if he looks outmatched in some kind of like he's in his own universe. and
Right.
I'm fine with him taking down like bigger people.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to disagree with Grace Randolph, but it's the movies. He has the power of goodness and right on his side.
He's
You know?
transformed. He took a
Yeah.
psychedelic. I mean, come on,
You
you know, like,
you watch
yeah.
Rocky 3 and oh no, I'm sorry. Rocky 4 and, the little guy versus the big guy. That's what we like. That's what we
We
want
love the
to
underdog
see.
coming against the big folks. Yes, we love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, the
So
fact that
speaking
he's
of that,
like a kind of a wiry, guy. He's not short.
yeah.
He's definitely a tall guy, but
Yeah.
all of that I think helped the narrative.
Yeah.
Like it would have been different if he was some big jacked, person fighting.
Right.
I think it would have been a different story. But so,
Yeah,
like I'm thinking of Roadhouse. I did see Roadhouse. I liked Roadhouse too, but I wanted them to lean more into the camp.
right. No, it's different. Yeah, it's doing its own different. It's weird in a different way.
It's totally different. Yeah, it's a totally
Yeah.
different type of movie. Yeah.
It's like, hey, what if our hero turned out to be a psychopath? Wouldn't that be funny? And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. But speaking of like size differences, I just wanted to shout out Sikander Kerr as Rana Singh. He's the police chief main enforcer of like the cult leader guy. I loved him in this movie. I haven't seen him in anything else, but he was so like archetypical, imposing. He looks like a mid-level boss on like a side-scrolling beat 'em up video game. Just like very broad shoulders, big mustache.
The mustache.
Yeah.
The mustache. Yeah, that was definitely a signifier. That had to
So
be
how
a
did you
signifier.
feel about him as kind of the not quite the big bad guy, but the main bad guy that we're interacting with?
I thought he was fabulous. I thought both. I mean, I thought they did a really good job of having. There was more than one bad guy, but they were different,
Yeah.
and they played different roles, and they had different arcs. And I thought he did a really good job. I would have liked maybe a tad more. It's hard to say, do this or that because the movie's already kind of at a length where I wouldn't want it to be longer, but
Right.
I would have liked a little bit more like internal conflict in both the bad guys where they showed a little bit of humanity so that they're not like cartoonishly evil.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were sort of like verging a little bit on too evil. And I would have liked a little bit of like, maybe he took a wrong path to get where he was. And maybe the other guy like started out with good intentions and then it got transformed into something bad. So like maybe a little bit more of that would have been nice, but it was satisfying to see their ends.
Yeah. And also Queenie, who's the woman in the office.
Yeah. That was also one of the finger thing that I totally didn't see that coming. I was wondering why that even happened. I was like, why is he carrying that around?
Yeah.
and then I realized, that was very satisfying too. I mean, the whole, like underdog to victor path is just so satisfying in an action movie. And so that, like definitely it hit all the sweet spots of that, which was nice. But yeah, I did really like, I mean, you mentioned earlier, I really liked all the flashbacks with his mom. And that's, again, it's really like hard to, how can you not love someone who loves their mom, right? Like, and there was a puppy at one point.
Yes.
I thought that was even going to be a thing,
the gun-bringing dog.
He's feeding the dog really expensive food, which I thought was a really nice touch.
Yeah.
From the restaurant. He got like the fancy food.
So how did you feel about, or I guess what is your interpretation of the ending? Because we see that he's quite wounded. And
yes.
He definitely kills the bad guy. So that guy's definitely dead. But he collapses.
He falls over.
We get more praying. And so is this his end?
That I don't know. And the thing that I love about it is that I don't know. And I hate to reference John Wick again, but John Wick 4 ended in an extremely similar, ambiguous, that everybody's arguing about end, where he's wounded he falls over. They cut to this kind of ambiguous scene. There wasn't such an ending, and I like there was no obviously like a tombstone scene, but like it seemed very similar to me in that we just don't know, and everyone can argue about it, and we just don't know. And I love that. I love ambiguous endings. I'm a huge fan of ambiguous endings, because I don't think everything needs to be wrapped up in a bow. I don't think they're lining it up for any kind of sequel. Like, I don't think he's going to do a sequel. It just doesn't seem like the kind of movie that's going to get a sequel or that he would want to do a sequel. So I don't get that vibe at all. But I definitely loved the, like, is his life so complete because he achieved his goal that he no longer needs to live? Is he just wounded and he's going to recover? I love the ambiguousness of it, the ambiguity of it.
Yeah, I think that there's evidence in the story because I think to a point we're believing, in part at least, in the spiritual side of things, right? This movie is threaded from beginning to end in prayer and spirituality. You already mentioned he goes through this hallucinogenic experience where we now see the story in full, right? And when he goes to the temple, they're like, God is not done with you, right? Because if he were, you wouldn't have survived. Oh man. Yeah. Quick little side note, but when he goes into that river, that is a dirty river, man. Holy moly.
Yeah. Oh my God, that was the one that I shouted at. I shouted.
I was like, you're dead. Just even if you walk out of that water, you're dead because that water's going into all of your holes and blood and you're dead, man. So I do think, and I'm not trying to like firmly say one way or the other because I agree with you. I love ambiguous endings. I love ambiguous movies. I don't even care about the ending. I like a movie where I don't know what I'm watching the entire time,
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So I do think that there is a little bit of evidence in the story to say this was his purpose. He's accomplished his purpose, and now he'll succumb to his injuries. But
now he's with God because he's achieved his purpose on the planet. Yeah, I think I can see that ending. Yeah, I mean, I kind of lean towards even just watching it in the moment. I was kind of leaning towards like he can't survive this; he's too injured. But I think I like that that's where they ended it. I just thought everything about the way they ended it was really spot on, and I mentioned the flashbacks, but I feel like this movie was extremely like one thing I like about movies is when they teach me something or they like entice me to learn about something. Mm-hmm. And where like I'll go Wikipedia it after the fact and be like, oh, what's this temple and like how does the system in India work and that kind of thing. Which I love that because that's a fun, interesting. I love learning about things and being kind of like, I didn't know about this thing, but now I want to know about this thing. And I think this movie for sure sparked a lot of that in me, like where I want to learn about, like, I don't know anything about the, Hindu or anything in India. Yeah. I kind of like, I know what any average American knows. And so I think this movie was really great for showing that, in a way that people can maybe learn about something they never knew about.
Right. Yeah. The movies that everyone wants to stop talking about are the ones that everyone won't stop talking about, right? And they're like, well, you're wrong about this and you're wrong about that. But those are the movies that I love the most because when I walk out of a theater and I'm like, what was that? How do I feel about that? How uncomfortable did that make me? Like I love uncomfortable stuff and I
totally do, yeah.
Yeah, like looking at Monkey Man and saying, well, I know nothing about that, so now I have to talk about it and I have to think about it and I have to learn more. Or I think you can just watch this movie and say, wow, that was a thrilling ride. I loved it, and you're done.
Yeah. I do think I love discourse. I know a lot of people complain about discourse, but I'm a huge fan of it. To me, that's like part of the fun of movies. And so if people are arguing, hopefully respectfully, but if people are arguing over, like Midsommar was a good example. I loved that discourse, all the arguments, even the ridiculous ones. I loved that people were like, no, it means this, or the boyfriend didn't deserve it, or, like all those kind of things. I love that. And I think good movies like kind of encourage that, by not spoon feeding you or not like telling you this is the only interpretation.
Yeah.
So I do like the discourse that comes with many movies. Like I loved the John Wick 4 arguments about whether he was alive or dead.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was super fascinating, and everybody had their own theories, and some people interpreted it metaphorically, and I love metaphorical interpretations. So like all of that just to me enhances the movie experience.
Absolutely. So we kind of talked about him getting killed, but the character Baba Shakti, played by Makarand Deshpande, how did you feel about him as kind of the... I didn't know at first that he was a bad guy because we see him on the TV at first.
Which one was
and
he?
I thought it was like
he's
like the main bad guy, like the leader.
Spiritual.
Yes.
Yeah. And I knew he was a bad guy from the beginning, but I don't know how I knew. Somehow I knew. Like maybe I saw it in the trailer. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I definitely was like, oh, he's the worst. And then like Mustache Man was maybe the second worst. And like, and then like Queenie was maybe the third worst. Like there was, to me, there were like 3 or 4 of them that he had to kind of defeat. And I somehow knew that they were all not good before I went into it, but I don't remember. I might have seen it in the trailer or something,
Right. Yeah, I was not confused, but at first we just see him on the TV and he's like doing like a TV interview, and I was like, is this like a commercial? Like, is this guy going to start like selling Coca-Cola or something?
I think I saw, I know what I saw. I think it was the trailer. I saw him in the car. He's like inside a fancy car, and like poor people are on the outside and he's like protected on the inside. So that was my first clue.
Right.
And I saw that before I saw the movie. So I think it was in the trailer, if I remember correctly. But that scene of him in the car where everyone's like pressing on the window, I thought was pretty good. They did some pretty interesting portrayals. I definitely want to rewatch it. When it comes to streaming, I don't know when it's going to... I wanted to make more money at the box office, though. How do we make that happen?
Yeah.
I did my part.
Saying it sold for $10 million, and it made $10 million like in its opening weekend. So like, everything on top of that will be good.
Good.
I don't know what the
I heard
budget
12,
was.
but that might have been after the fourth day.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely more than 10 by now, but I hope it's enough to get him more opportunities to direct movies.
Definitely. Yeah, this has been the beginning of every calendar year is a rough year for new releases. But I feel like this year in particular has been like, there's always good stuff. There's always great stuff, right? But just now we're in like April, and I feel like we're finally starting to really get some stuff that we can like sink our teeth into. And Monkey Man is definitely one of the best releases of the year so far.
Yeah. I would love to see. I mean, I heard bad reviews, but the bad reviews didn't resonate at all with me. I think that, like, I heard, oh, he's outmatched, or it's not realistic, or it's too grim. I'm like, no, there's no such thing as too grim. Bring all the grim. I want grim. Too much grim doesn't bother me at all. Too much brutality doesn't bother me at all. So certain people don't like the same thing. I obviously like dark movies, and I think a lot of people don't, but everybody has different taste. But yeah, I thought it was like just the right amount of brutality and grim and dark.
I would accept someone saying like, yeah, it drags a little bit, but like I said, to me, I think that that's actually necessary. I think it makes the rest of the movie work. And then the other part is, if you're not into violence, do not see this movie.
Right. I mean,
like if someone watches and they're like, yeah, like, oh, I'm uncomfortable with the amount of violence, I wouldn't be like, no, you have to like it. You have to watch this dude, get his thumb or whatever. But
Nobody has to endure the pain of an uncomfortable movie experience just because
Right.
I like it, like,
Right.
yeah. But like, I would definitely say, I like everything from like the Saw movies on one side to like The Princess Bride on the other side. I like a very broad range of violence from super violent to not violent at all. And I would say this is, obviously a little closer to the Saw end of things, but definitely not torture porn
No,
and
no.
not a horror movie. Like I do get sometimes horror vibes from some action movies, but not this one. This one didn't give me any like horror movie vibes. Like I don't know if you ever saw Only God Forgives, which is
Yes.
yes,
Oh yeah.
that one gave me horror movie vibes, which I liked. But
Yeah.
this one didn't. This one just struck me as like action.
So very quickly, I just want to mention the fighting arena scenes with Sharlto Copley as Tiger. I'm a big fan of Sharlto Copley. Like I think like everyone, I saw him at first in District 9, and I mean, it might still be his like best performance, but I enjoy seeing him pop up in little things here and there.
Nice. I
And
didn't recognize him. I did see District 9, but I didn't recognize him because it's been a while since I saw District 9.
sure. When when Kid has to fight the giant at the end who has a bat covered in barbed wire, man, I was like,
Yeah, I
oh,
was like, what's going to happen with that bat? The
oh
bat.
man. Yeah. But it
Yeah,
was it
I
was it
enjoyed
was a
that.
great progression, to see. And the guy who used to beat the crap out of him, he just knocks out with one kick. And yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. Yeah, I didn't expect there because I didn't read the synopsis, so I didn't know there was going to be like a transformation, and that was super
Mhm.
delightful because often in action movies there's no transformation. It's just they're ass kicking from day one and they're ass kicking at the end. And I do feel like John Wick does this, but many others also do this. Having the protagonist getting the crap beaten out of them makes the empathy work.
Yeah.
You root for them when they're a little bit damaged because if they're just a machine without any ability to take any pain, it's harder to empathize, I think. And so you see some action movies now where like the person's getting hurt, but they're like overcoming it or they're getting stronger or like healing and coming back or that kind of thing. And I like that better because I feel like it's supposed slightly more realistic, but most importantly, it just makes me empathize with the person more when like, oh man, they're getting hurt, like get up or like,
Right.
be
Right.
careful or that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there have to be stakes in movies for us to be interested. And in this
Yeah.
one, there are stakes. There are things that hurt him. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there
Yeah.
anything that we didn't mention that you wanted to mention?
I would say I did very much like the way they did the reveal on his hand injuries.
Mm,
Like that was a really good like because they showed his hands and there's something wrong with his hands and they kind of explained it towards the end in a reveal. I love that. I thought that was really good.
I was a big fan of The Mask.
Yeah, the mask was good. It was creepy, but also like bedraggled. Like
Yeah.
I kind of felt like he was a bedraggled kind of character at first, and so yeah, the mask was good. I like the mask,
Yeah. And it's
and I
always
like the
good
mythology
to,
behind. I'm forgetting the name of it, but there's a mythology. I forget the name of it. I'd have to look it up.
yeah.
Because it's H. The
Yes.
mythology behind that character was super interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's always good when you're presenting a new character to audiences to create like an iconic kind of image, like a
Yeah.
silhouette or whatever. And here, I think you have that with, literally putting him in a monkey mask that looks super cool. He's bleeding out of it, and it's like, oh man.
Yeah.
maybe maybe I did find one thing that I'd be like, okay, you can cut that out. Was when he bleached it, because it's the white monkey, right? In the legend, it's the white monkey.
Yeah,
So he
yeah.
bleaches it, puts it on, and then just like immediately takes it off. I was like,
The only thing I
Wear it
would
a
have changed
little
about
bit
the
more.
movie is his friend and the character name. I'm forgetting the character name, but his short friend who helps him at first. I wanted to see him also get an arc and show up at the end somehow because he, his leg was gone. Like he had a whole interesting backstory, and I would have liked his entire story to have an arc because I thought he was a really interesting character.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we both really liked this. I don't know. I haven't really thought about like what I would rate this or not. I just say go see it. If you haven't seen it, go see it. Especially if you're a fan of action movies. And yeah, definitely Dev Patel. Love you as an actor, but I think you need to be directing more stuff.
Yeah. I am definitely in my insufferable Dev Patel fan era. Gotta watch all his movies, But yeah, I think both. I would love to see him both in both acting, big, higher profile acting roles, and also more director roles. I think he's great at both.
So, Kristen, thanks for joining me. This was fun.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank you for inviting me.
Where can people find you online?
I am Made of Monsters on Twitter, but you can also find me by my whole name, Kristen Ankiewicz. I also have a website, ankiewicz.com.
Very cool. Very cool. Yes, definitely give her a follow. I consider you to be one of the good people.
Thank you.
Hey, if you saw Monkey Man and you would like to give us your thoughts, send us an email, moviefriendspodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought. Were we wrong? Were we totally wrong? Do you have some insight into Indian culture that you can give us and educate us with? Please let us know. We would love for you to do the research and hard work and then just distill it to us. That'd be super sick. We'd also love it if you'd rate and review the show wherever you're listening. It really helps. The downloads are great. The listens are great. The likes are great. But the rating and review, that's the real thing right there. That's the whole kit and caboodle. Anyway, thanks again, Kristen. Thank you very much. This was fun.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And thank you very much for listening. Have a good one.
Movie Friends is produced by Seth Vargas and Michelle Rubenstein. Music by Anthony Vicora. If you like the show, please subscribe and give us a rating. It really helps us find new friends. Thanks!